So Deborah, welcome to the to the podcast. I was just actually just thinking, trying to remember back how many years I might have known you. Do you reckon?
Hmm. Wow. It is way back when I want to say 2015 comes to
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, that sounds about
I
right.
think even before,
Yeah,
gosh,
I
I know definitely 2015 is when I took on a more of a volunteer role and did a lot more with Mother's Helpers.
yeah, and you've just got back from overseas recently, so you're
Yes.
back. Are you happy to say where you are located?
Yes, I'm on Waiheke Island.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
the weird thing is that I feel like we've both lived on Waiheke Island, but not at the same time. Is that right?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think
So
that's correct.
yeah. So weirdly, I met you in a completely different way. So we met, it was to do with Mother's Helpers. Um,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, I think you just maybe applied,
Yeah.
I think you
I
applied
think
for
I
a role.
did. I think I was in the States. That's right. Now I remember because I
Oh,
was in the
right.
States and then I reached out because I saw the position and I was looking for work. And yeah, I think that is how it happened.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I came because I've been on Waiheke Island. Then I went back to the States for 2.5 years. And then
Oh,
2015 is when
yeah.
I returned the second time. So I've been on
Oh,
Waiheke
okay.
Island since 2009.
Okay. So I wonder if, okay, so my son was 3 and 4 years old when we were in Waiheke, and that would have been, he was born in 2009. So I'm going to say 2012, 2013. Were you overseas then?
That's yes, exactly. That's hilarious.
It's
Exactly. We
weird, isn't
we went
it?
back to the States in 2012.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just so strange. Anyway, it's like we're taking turns or something. You're like holding space. You're holding space for
Back
me
and
over there.
forth. And that means our kids are the same age. My daughter was born in 2009.
Ah, right. Well,
She's 14.
I've got express permission, expressed lack of permission to talk about my son
Got it.
on the podcast. But I will
Got it.
mention that he is 6 foot at this point in time at age 13. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I will only mention that his feet are growing they're at the same size as his age, which is quite concerning at this point. So,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I'm going to say about that. Um, he may or
That's
may
a
not.
good, very healthy, respectful boundary.
Yes, yes, yes. We had a good
Awesome.
discussion about what is and isn't okay for me to talk about. So that's
Awesome.
good. That's good. So you're happily in a closed cafe, your friend's
Yes.
cafe on
Yes,
Waiheke, which is just the most ideal background. And
it is.
I guess it's just to say, Mother's Helpers, for those that don't know, it's a an organisation in New Zealand that helps women or mothers with perinatal depression and anxiety and helps them to become well. And Deborah was involved in the early days of that, even though it's been going since 2010. I think 2015 was when we launched the Out of the Fog program, which was then called a different name. But you were one of the first facilitators to run
Yes,
that program, which is very cool. And you ran some groups on Waiheke as well as
I
online.
did. Yes,
Yeah,
online and on Waiheke, I did.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's a wonderful experience.
So amazing that, we've gone back all of this time and I still come to you because about different things, as you know, approaching you because you're amazing and you've got so much to contribute. And I remember having you at one of our seminars teaching other facilitators about taking the Out of the Fog program
Mhm.
and running it. And I had so much positive feedback for you and the part that you contributed to that was really, really, really good value. So
Because I specialize in the couples
yeah,
portion as I'm
that's
a
right.
licensed marriage and family therapist. So a lot of
Yeah,
my training is in
yeah,
couples and families
yeah. So
systems.
yeah, so do you want to sort of just start with maybe giving a little bit of a background about background of career, or,
Yes.
obviously you're
Yes.
not from around here. So,
Right, which has caused some issues,
right.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay.
But in the States, so I have my I originally got my I was going to be a school teacher, so elementary ed. So I was always into child development.
Yeah.
And then I decided I wanted to go, and I always loved psychology. And then I got my bachelor's in psychology. And then when I was in a psychology course, they were talking about marriage and family therapy, and I had never heard of marriage and family therapy. And I thought that's fascinating. And then I decided to look up the top schools for marriage and family therapy. And then I got accepted to Colorado State University, where they only allow 8. 16 are interviewed, and only 8 make the cut into
Wow.
this program. Yeah, it was so intense.
Mm.
And so my master's is in human development family studies with specialization in marriage and family therapy. And then from there on, I went right into private practice out of school, and I got a contract with Department of Human Services and got blessed to work with Dr. Bruce Perry,
Wow.
who is
Wow.
the Child Trauma Academy. I
Yeah.
mean, he's just whenever there's a massive event with children and trauma, he's
Mm.
the one on call. And he teaches neurosequential therapy,
Yeah.
models of therapeutics. And man, he just blew me away
Yeah.
just listening to
Yeah.
him. And then I did many other trauma coursework through the Department of Human Services. That was a different paradigm of
Mm.
how to parent, because all negativity comes from a state of stress. And so, here you are in the system, and most families in the system are going to get more stress, and they're not going to be their best. And so it was wonderful to be part of that. And then I just continue to have my own private practice and maintain it's been fantastic. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's so for 20 since 20 I opened my practice in 23, so it's been 20 years. I mean, it's been 2003. That's when I opened my private practice. So 20 years.
And this might be the time to tell people that you're not accepting new clients at the moment.
Great. I was also blessed to be ahead of the curve for online therapy because
Yeah.
I've been living in New Zealand, and I went back to the States to start my private practice there. I wanted to keep my clients, and my clients wanted to keep working with me. That I went online back in 2015. And so I've been online, and have had a waiting list for some clients have waited 8 months, and I
Wow.
finally just got them in. So I'm just, yeah, currently at this time, and I'm also working on books. So I've got a
Oh,
book that
exciting.
yes, so trying to get those out.
When you get those out, we'll have to have you come back and tell us about them.
Oh,
That'd be great.
absolutely.
Anyway, we're really, really lucky to have you because your time is incredibly precious. And as we can tell, you've got an 8-month wait list. So there you go.
It's
Yeah. So I mean, I I know that you arrived in New Zealand. You were just saying that you arrived in New Zealand. I think I lost the dates. Was it was it when your babies were young?
so the first was 2008 technically, and
Yeah.
my daughter was born in 2009, and then I left again and came back in 2015. But
Right.
pretty much we've been here for about 15 years, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's obviously a family of 4, and you
Yeah.
originally came from where?
Chicago.
Yeah.
That's right. So originally I'm from Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
And then I went to Colorado to get my master's. And then we've been in New Zealand.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh. Um, and so like, I mean, obviously today we're, I'd love to bring you back and talk about family and couples. We will see how you go for time because I know your time's precious, but I hope to do that. Today I just want to focus, and it is all connected anyway, and I know that you can't sort of separate these things out, but really wanted to bring you in to talk about trauma specifically. Obviously, I've been following you on your Facebook page for a long time,
Mhm.
which do you want to share what your Facebook page is?
Oh, it's my name, Deborah Wallace, MS LMFT Positive Reframe. And I also have a website. My business is called positivereframe.org. And specifically because I love working with pregnant, the more the more that you get 2 for 1 when you can work with a pregnant. Ideally, I would love to get a campaign going, a peaceful parenting and pregnancy campaign going, because oh my gosh, it starts in the womb. It
Yeah.
really does. This is the
Yeah.
first partnership
Yeah.
as well. So,
Yeah. And that's
so
kind of
positive reframe.
that's where our passions kind of overlapped, because obviously
Yes.
when I founded Mothers Helpers, I was, I am and was passionate about it, and so were you. So that's kind of
Yes.
how that went.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
and being a thriver of trauma as well, of having an extensive trauma history, as well as I specialize in trauma. I'm actually doing the 7th course. There's a 7-month course I'm doing with Vessel Van Kolk currently. I'm in the middle of. Trauma is my specialty, so I can go on and
yeah.
on.
Yeah, well, that's what you're here for, to go on and on.
Yes.
So, I'd just love to talk to you a little bit about that, because whenever I looked on your Facebook page, there were always these, there were often, I'm probably one of your greatest fans, actually. I'm always liking your stuff or sharing your stuff. But I really liked some of the things that came up around trauma, because, and you've always been someone that, I remember one of the things that you said, you're a big handout person. You're often giving out. and
I,
so, and
I've
you,
been known as the handout queen.
so, it's kind of like, you have so much information, really amazing information. And I really just wanted to find out from you, what is the interest for you around trauma? What got you interested, I guess, in trauma, or focused? It's not entirely just on trauma alone, but you have a
Right.
big focus on trauma. And I'm just wondering
Oh,
where that came from.
well, for me, trauma is, I mean, it's the building of the central nervous system.
Hmm.
And anything that happens, especially during our critical and most vulnerable years of development, which are 0 to 7, roughly, anything that happens or does not happen, that's the other thing. There's traumas of omission as well.
Hmm.
And that impacts how the brain gets developed. And then that impacts how you have a relationship with self, and then how you have a relationship. And one of my favorite quotes I share often is, the first 3 years of life creates the blueprint for all future relationships. And so anything that your need, and these vital needs that need to be met. I mean, the opportunity, that's why I loved, actually, even before I got to work with Bruce Perry, I actually listened to his, when I had my child, and I was like, oh, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, I'm going to pop in one of these videos from when we had cassette tapes
Yeah.
of the 10 things every child needs. That's how far it went back. And I remember he said this line of, by the age of 3, if you don't get these needs met, like the potential that you lose was like, you lose like 15% of the brain potential. Like, it was like this extraordinary number. And I was
Mhm.
like, what?
Yeah.
How? We're missing out. Like, this is key. And then it put a little pressure on me. But I
Yeah.
still got some time, because he was only 8 months old at the time when I popped in the video. Um, but I'm a person that I've always been really interested in real life, and what's happening in front of me. And obviously the commitment to be a parent, I think, is the most important decision in this world. And so you're raising a human being. So, as I mentioned, I'm a thriver of trauma. I have a family history of a lot of trauma. So, I had already started to see the effects that was happening. And
Yeah.
I, of course, wanted to do things differently. So
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
figure out what is the magic, what can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's more, I think there's more awareness about trauma now. We're talking about it more now.
Mhm,
But there's not necessarily an understanding of what it is. I think people
mhm,
may or may not identify trauma. Is there
mhm.
any kind of, I mean, there won't be one definition, but is there
Right.
a good kind of description of trauma that you've
Mhm.
found, that might help people to identify, oh, I have experienced trauma?
And I do have one that I use. It's actually by a gentleman named Dr. Brian Post. And his definition is anything that goes on emotionally, mentally, physically, that goes on, that's prolonged, it's out of our control, it's unpredictable, and it's prolonged. So that's a stressor. So that's actually the first part. Then potentially anything can become a stressor. So any stressor can become a trauma if it happens too fast, too soon, and you have no safe place to process it, make sense of it,
Right.
and um, have it understood, make sense of it, process it, and express it. Those are
Yeah.
like the three. So anything can potentially come traumatic. So it's the most important thing is that you have a safe place to process it,
Yeah.
express it, and make sense of it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I find is the key part.
And in
Um,
actual fact, we'll be talking down the track a little bit about birth trauma, and it's actually one of the things that we and Mothers Helpers are really keen to do is to hear that story early on before it becomes
mhm,
trauma that is heading in the direction of PTSD.
mhm.
Because it's that debriefing, isn't it, really? It's that
Yeah.
processing, as you say, as early as
Yes.
possible can prevent that trauma setting in. So
Absolutely. Name it to tame it is like the simple. That's why it's actually it's so simple.
yeah, yeah,
The healing of it is actually so simple if we allow that safe place just to let it out, not judge it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
be compassionate and not tell someone what they should feel. Let them express it,
yeah.
process, express it, make sense of it.
And
Absolutely.
I wonder if our culture works against us a little bit, and by that I'm sort of thinking, I mean, I don't know, you as an American coming to New Zealand, you would probably have fresh eyes into our culture, I guess, in New
Mm-hmm.
Zealand, because I mean, I imagine, I don't know, would you say that in America that, perhaps there's more of a willingness to talk about things than perhaps here in New Zealand?
I think there can be. However, I
Yeah,
do find that that cross section appears
yeah,
everywhere. There's
yeah,
still those people who are rigid and don't want to hear a thing, no
yeah,
matter where you go around the
yeah,
world. Um, I do think one thing that was confusing about when I first moved to New Zealand, it did feel so free. But that could be Waiheke Island. I felt like,
yeah,
wow, you're so creative. It's so open.
yeah,
But there was a limit. You did find there was a line that you could
yeah,
express yourself. And I was like, oh, I don't. So that was that was confusing.
yeah.
Whereas in America, you'd kind of know which where to
Where
go
what?
and not go.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that probably is a little bit informed by what state you're in and things like that. So I mean, there's cultures everywhere, but I think I just geographically and families and all of that stuff. But I guess I'm
Mhm.
just wondering, and I'm just reflecting on, you know, New Zealand is informed a lot by that British culture of stiff upper lip,
Yes.
stiff
Yeah,
upper lip and that still really has a big impact on us. And I think
it does.
we're kind of I would describe it as maybe for Britain it's have a stiff upper lip, and maybe with New Zealand there's another phrase that we use, but we kind of like tough it out, or just kind of
Hmm.
get on with it a little bit. So I think
Yes.
that's kind of where trauma can really kick in and become a problem,
Hmm.
because we might
Yes,
have a reluctance to talk about stuff.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
guess, are you able to kind of, for the listeners' purpose, to kind of talk about the neuroscience that's going on when someone experiences trauma? What's actually going on in the brain?
Well, what I like to do, I mean, I can do my hand model
Yeah.
and that can kind of show. Have I done my
Yeah.
hand model too? I can't remember. I probably have,
I
but
have a hand model too. So
so it's Dan Singles, but I also weave in the work that I've done with Bruce Perry to add a little bit,
sure.
and I think it helps. So is it okay if I go
Yeah, of
ahead
course you
to show the
can.
hand
Go,
model?
go,
So
go.
um basically what this is our brainstem back
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
which does the fight, flight, or freeze. And then the top is our prefrontal cortex, which does all our reasoning, right from wrong, planning, all those higher functioning skills, problem solving, all that good stuff. And then in the middle is that amygdala, the emotional center. And pretty much normal, what we're all doing without even our conscious awareness is 24/7. This part of our brain is on,
Mm.
scanning the environment
Yeah.
for cues of threat and safety, which again, it's perceiving. It doesn't have to be real. It's perception
Yeah.
of, I think it's really key for people to know that. And what happens is when we're feeling safe and we have a caregiver who's attuned to us and confident and secure, and they're able to let us know that things are safe, then we can stay calm and connected and access all our smart files. Whereas when we sense a threat, then we flood our brain with, so this is where the part where
Yeah.
a stressor comes. We're perceiving a threat. And then if we have no good memory, first we're going to go to our own memory. And this just is an eighth of a second. It just takes an eighth of a second
Mm.
for your brain to do this assessment process.
Yeah.
And then if you have no memory of this going well, and then if you have no one next to you that can be calm and providing the safety cues for you, you're going to fire the alarms. And this
Yeah.
is what's happening when a stressor is happening. And then the cortisol and all the stress hormones flip your lid, and you no longer can communicate to your smart files. And then you only pull from whatever happened to you, 0 to 8, 0 to 7.
Yeah.
That's however your family handled it. And then fight, flight, freeze, or deep freeze.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to do. And so what trauma then is, so it's going to keep firing, and it's saying, sorry, no one's coming for you. You don't have any
Yeah.
good memories of this going well. And so you just kind of get stuck.
Mm.
And it's an autonomic state. It's, I talk about in a manual transmission of a car,
Mm.
it just goes. You don't have a
Yeah.
conscious choice of this. So that's what our central nervous system is doing. So if you have trauma, and again, this sensory part that's on 24/7, sight, smell, touch, it goes through all your senses. So
Yeah.
when you have a trauma, then what's happening then is now you've become, you now have, your body has now internalized that as a massive threat.
Mm.
And you are going to go more quickly now to this
Yeah.
space, fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
And you can't access the smart files.
Yeah.
And you are literally, and then there's also, that's why you can feel like you're in the past, or you're worried about the future, because there's this metaphysical realm that's happening inside of the brain. So it's the stress hormones taking over. Most humans need compassion, need a safe
Mm.
place, need some gentle, respectful touch, something to ground them.
Mm.
Nature is very grounding. You got to figure out your own recipe to help you move through your
Yeah.
nervous system so that you can get back to a state of calm.
Yeah. Because that amygdala is faulty, and it's firing,
Exactly.
off the information, alarm, 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 in a faulty way. And so
Right.
actually that is kind of where
Becomes hypersensitive. It becomes overstimulated, hypersensitive. And then when people are like, what's the matter with you? They're actually only reinforcing that, because now that person's like,
yeah.
there's something wrong with me.
Ooh,
It's like,
yeah.
no, let's slow down.
Yeah.
If we go back to where the trauma happened, it all makes sense,
Yeah.
and
Now
then you can
you said,
breathe through
like,
that.
so you said we talked about fight, flight, and freeze. So a lot of people are very familiar with fight and flight because they know that when I feel like I can, I'll run to get away. I need to just out the door. I'll just get away. If I can't get away, I tend to fight my corner. Now that could look like yelling or
Yes.
violence maybe, or
Yeah. Right.
but if we, for any reason, we don't go to those two, we then go down to shut down mode, don't we? Did you want
Right.
to just describe freeze? Because I feel like a lot of people, they think freeze is just when you kind of get a shock and and actually we tend to call that sense intense. That shock is sense intense, but
Yes.
freeze is quite different. Did you want to describe?
Right. That's why I'll even
Freezes?
use deep freeze sometimes
Yeah,
to talk
yeah,
about that
yeah,
one, because and it happens a couple different ways, because like you said, we'll typically often go to fight flight at
yeah,
first, even if it's just a moment.
yeah,
But some people just are in fight or flight for so long that then they eventually just collapse
yes.
into deep freeze. Or some people can just quickly jump
Go
down.
to
I mean, they
freeze.
go through, but right, go to
Yeah.
deep freeze. But right, it is very different. It's more of a dissociation kind of,
Yes.
and I believe everything goes on a continuum. So I'm never
Yeah.
saying anyone has a dissociative disorder, but it definitely, you shut down. You are numbed out. Your central nervous system is so overwhelmed. It literally cannot take anything else off, and it just shuts down.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some people, they go there quite quickly, don't they? Because that's
Yes,
kind of like
yes.
they might do fight. Some people do fight or flight
Right,
first, and that doesn't work. And then they go
right.
to freeze. But some people
Hmm.
go straight to that, like you call it, deep freeze, because
Hmm.
that's the pathway that their brain's been going
Hmm.
down for such a long time that that's how
Right.
they've coped with stress and trauma,
Exactly.
difficult, challenging
Right. And
situations.
that's where I do want to point out that, like I said, it is a ladder. So they,
Yeah.
at some point, they absolutely did have to go through fight or flight, which also is a sign that they probably have trauma,
Yeah.
complex
Yeah.
trauma, a
Yeah.
history of trauma, because they now learn that that wasn't successful and that they just go down to this
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which, I mean, if you want to go into how detrimental this is for parenting, um, because that's, you're supposed to be attuned to your baby. And if a
Mm,
parent is a mother, and mother, I mean, the lack of support for mothers is unbelievable. They're
yeah.
overwhelmed, they're
Yeah.
exhausted, they're tired, they're probably not getting the nutrition they need. And then they can't pick up the cues. And then if they do hear their baby cry, they're so stressed, at least for me. I know that was my experience. I was so
Yeah.
stressed out. I just read my baby's cry as an inadequacy of mine.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
so painful,
So
so
it's
painful.
so difficult, isn't it? Because I mean, we're obviously often dealing with women, and there'll be, mothers listening who have depression or anxiety, and the worst thing you can hear is that you may be causing your child any kind of pain or hurt. When
Right.
you yourself, if you've got depression or anxiety, you are in pain
Hmm.
and you're hurt.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It's such a hard situation.
It really
So
is.
getting help is the as soon as possible is the
Hmm.
best. And it's
Absolutely.
sometimes if you can't manage to do that for yourself, doing that for your baby is, if that's what it, motivates you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the hard part. When you're in that state, you don't even know you're in that state. This
No.
is why,
Yeah.
it takes the collective
Yeah.
to support non-judgmentally
Yeah.
and just make it the
Absolutely.
norm.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And
Just giving birth is huge. Let's just
yeah.
give them
Yeah.
support.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, so obviously we're talking about stuff that people might be carrying in their lives since a very young age that they might not even necessarily
Right.
be aware of, that was before their
Hmm.
cognitive memories, but they have an
Right.
inkling that all was not okay in their family, and so they probably have got some
Hmm.
of these symptoms.
Hmm.
For you, what's the connection between, why is, we can kind of make the connection between trauma and PTSD. We make that connection really easily. What is the connection between other mental health conditions such as depression or anxiety? Because often that's what I've seen when you're often talking about trauma,
Yep.
is that often it's unaddressed trauma going on
Hmm.
for some of us experiencing depression or anxiety. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, I have a very different perspective. So I am trained to diagnose. I know all the diagnoses. I have to as a licensed practitioner. I'm actually not a fan of diagnoses because at the end of the day, I believe all diagnosis is really the manifestation of a stressed out, dysregulated central nervous system.
Mm,
And so a diagnosis matches up for the length of time, because usually to get depression, you'd have to be in this state for 6 weeks. Most of those,
yeah.
mood disorders, you need to have those symptoms for 6 weeks.
Mm,
And so to me, if you map out the states of dysregulation, well, that's a dysregulated system. And if you look at if you think about all the odds, all the combinations of how complex our central nervous system, there's a whole host of the way that stress can manifest and play out on you.
mm,
Um, and this is why I love the work with Dr. Bruce Perry, because, it's controversial. He's written an article, there's no some people have taken it out of context that there's no ADHD. And his point is, if you look at it all stems back because he can map out. It's amazing his work, by the way that their behaviors, their education, you can map out where the trauma occurred in the likelihood in the development of that child based on the symptoms that they're saying. And so to me, I think most of us have at least something in our lives that was very hurtful and painful. And the thing is, emotions, they have been able to see in the brain that, being, I'm trying to think of the word, separated, isolated, is just as painful. Emotional pain. It highlights the same parts of the pain as physical pain in the brain. It highlights. So for me, all the people that I work with, and I do attachment interviews, and I can always find these stories of people as they're telling me their stories, like, and I can just map out and see where in their younger lives did something happen that was so confusing, unpredictable, out of their control. Then they had no safe place to process it and make sense, and that just caused heaps of problems later on in life. So, I really boil it all down to trauma. To be fair, I think there's always something there. And if you just make sense of it, we can move through it. Obviously, there's more, there are those big traumas. Obviously I work in worst case scenarios. So I see the gamut.
Yeah.
And what it's important for you to know, and then for anyone I'm work with, it's not that I'm saying that this broken leg to this person is, or the person that had a murdered family member or watched someone be murdered, I'm obviously, if you say that one's worse. However, what people have to understand, the central nervous system, your eyes only knows your life.
Yeah.
That broken leg can be just as traumatic as that murder to that family, because that person only knows their lived life experience. If they had no safe place to process that. And
I think what you're highlighting is really important, because what I hear you're saying is that it's very subjective. Trauma is subjective. We can't know. The person that's talking to us about this experience is the only one who can tell us that it's traumatic. Because none of it, we're all dealing with we deal with different situations and different challenges in different ways. And for some of us, if we put ourselves into their shoes, we might say, well, that wouldn't traumatize me. And so we base our judgments on that.
Our own lens. Exactly. Yeah.
So whereas that doesn't mean that their experience is somehow not going to be trauma because we wouldn't respond in that way. It's as you said, it's the brain and how the brain responds to that particular situation.
Right. Which this is what I love about Dr. Dan Siegel's work, when he talks about integration. That a central nervous has gotten their needs met by the acronym of FACES. It's flexible, it's adaptive, it's coherent, it's energized, it's stable. And because I'll have people who'll be like, oh, my childhood was great, I had no trauma. Yet they're rigid, they're inflexible. So I'm able to map out and say, I know there's something, because had you gotten your vital needs met, you would have those faces, that you would be marked by faces, and you wouldn't be here complaining about all this other stuff that's going on in your life, and you wouldn't have all these other problems. So let's just get down to it. So I love that acronym FACES. I love Dr. Dan Siegel work. Because that is the tricky part. There's lots of traumas out there that people are like, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
And then they're just passing on trauma to everybody else.